Hi there, my name's Lindsay Honsinger. I'm going to be reading from my new novel, Giving Up the Ghost. It essentially maps the internal and external trajectories of a family navigating grief. Um, it explores the essentially how despair and brokenness of a family and sorrow can lead to a place where hope and reconciliation are possible. Danny's room was exactly as he had left it, cluttered and yet ordered, like a museum exhibit filled with personal artifacts. A pair of slippers neatly placed at the foot of the bed, sheet and blanket pulled military tight at the corners. A desk, a computer, an electric guitar, an amplifier, a stereo. As Vanderlei perused the shelves full of CDs and DVDs, he noticed that the band names all seemed to represent something lethal and foreboding. Venom, Hellhammer, Mayhem, Dark Throne. The video games had equally disturbing titles: Abomination, The Nemesis Project, Counter-Strike, Halo, Call of Duty, something called Duke Nukem. He was reminded of the day when Danny asked for a Game Boy Advance. At the time, Vanderlei didn't really know anything about video games, hadn't paid much attention since high school, when he and his friends used to feed quarters into the 2D arcade console called Asteroids. In his mind, it was all just a harmless waste of time. Rudimentary graphics, cheap sound effects. But when Danny unwrapped the handheld console on his 12th birthday, Vanderlei took note of his son's dilated pupils, the increased cardiovascular activity, and the slight hyperventilation that were classically symptomatic of someone who had just ingested an opioid. And indeed, like a drug user, before the batteries even wore out, his son was petitioning for something better. His plea for a PlayStation included a number of promises involving chores and grades. Despite these warning signs, Vanderlei and Arya decided that as long as Danny kept up his end of the bargain, it was a win-win situation. But the PlayStation brought with it the disturbing soundtrack of revving engines, gunfire, and explosions, punctuated by their son's exclamations of frustration and anger. Vanderlei consulted a psychiatrist friend who said it was probably nothing more than a hormonal phase, but Vanderlei wasn't so sure. They got Danny to agree to a limited number of hours of play per day, but when he moved on to online gaming, the time restrictions they had set became much harder to enforce. Before they knew it, he was playing with and against other users around the world. It was at this point that he started referring to people with names like Game Wizard and Destroyer 7 as his friends. What else had he missed, Vanderlei wondered. It was then that he noticed that the power button on the computer tower under the desk was emitting a dull pulse. He reached for the keyboard and hit the space bar. The hard drive whirred and the screen sparked to life, revealing a desert landscape, a crashed vehicle smoldering on its side. In the distance, there was a mosque with holes blown into its walls, military helicopters swarming on the horizon. Dead soldiers were strewn above the battlefield. At the bottom of the screen protruded the business end of a massive gun with the player's virtual hand gripping the barrel. This is it, Vanderlei thought. Entertainment that stimulates basic adrenaline-inducing reactions that desensitize the psyche to the comparative mundane stresses of reality. Once mastery of the virtual battlefield is achieved, the logical progression is to enlist and apply one's skills in the theater of actual war. While I was burying myself in work, my wife was gallivanting across the globe. My daughter was vandalizing herself with tattoos and hair dye, and my son was up here in his room, learning to kill. Thank you.